is NAB Show Live.
At Sony Pictures Entertainment, and Andrew Shulkind, who is Director of Content Innovation and Creative Technologies. He's an independent consultant. So I think that AI and machine learning is such a hot topic. Thank you guys so much for being here. First of all, what are the new tools that are available to post-production and production professionals with AI and machine learning?
I can go first. Right now, there's several tools around workflow automation and augmentation, things around just taking care of some of the more tedious tasks that are traditionally done by folks on the production. So being able to do things like harvest metadata, even doing some translation, scene analysis, scene identification. So as opposed to somebody manually going in and tagging a scene with certain people in it, the AI can identify that this is a particular actor, this is a particular car, particular piece of artwork in the background. And so right now it's more workflow augmentation.
I mean, on the production side, it's still early. It's really early days, and I think that what we're seeing is a lot of tools that are available, sort of cloud-based tools and post-production tools that are starting to trickle their way earlier into the production process. We're starting to see some early development tools that are able to use natural language processing to understand scripts and understand IP and be able to start to segment what audiences look like and how to get content to the right place.
This is sort of a layman's kind of question here, but what's the learning curve with these tools that we are going to all have to embrace?
I mean, I was just going to throw, because you'll have a deeper thing to talk about. I think that the real layman's version is it's all about the data set. It's all about what you're training your models on, because the way machine learning works is you're training a model based on a ton of data, and the more data you have, the more accurate it is, and the more relevant data, the more you can correlate it to what you're trying to get out of it, the more accurate it's going to be. So it's all about what you're training it on, and if you're training it on not enough data, then your information, your results really aren't as accurate as they could be.
Sure, and to go with that, it's very early days for AI, and it's someone in a previous conference asked the question, if I want to go out and learn about AI, what do you recommend? And from the panel, there was no easy answer. Everything is pretty much you have to go out and build yourself.
Really?
So there is a pretty steep learning curve still, and there's multiple tool sets from multiple vendors. But like Andrew said, a lot goes into the data and training data for the AI, and that's just as important as your AI algorithm.
So today, which technologies are most relevant, do you think? Just today, with what people are needing to learn?
I think, to Daniel's earlier point, I think the most relevant, the best use case is about labeling and metadata and tagging right now, because it's sort of the lowest hanging fruit, it's easily available.
Yeah.
But I think what we're seeing is we're really seeing the content business transition into the data business. And so suddenly all these data tools that are available to information systems are now available in production pipelines.
So which end of the production, which person in production would be the one to learn these new tools?
Right now it's going to be people, I believe, primarily residing on the studio side or the production company side, not necessarily the crew themselves. I don't think that production crews, they're more focused on finishing the product as opposed to generating data, as important as it may be.
Yeah.
But it'll be up to the studio side to implement some of these tools on the back end, basically to go through and analyze this data. And while it does sound kind of boring, generating metadata, it could open up a lot of other opportunities, a lot of footage that gets left on the cutting room floor.
Oh,
if
really?
you run some of that footage through an AI, it can identify things that could be reused, like in the stock footage market. It could also identify potential product placement opportunities that maybe weren't there by identifying what's being used in the scene. So there are a lot of opportunities there. We just don't know everything yet. We're kind of scratching the surface.
We're still exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, no, absolutely. I'm just wondering because do they actually save time and expense, or not yet, or they will?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really the secret. The secret of what AI is designed to do is to be a co-processor, to help deal away with some of the tedious tasks. And I think the real value of what that is hasn't even been seen yet. I think a lot of times at trade shows like this, there's sort of like the buzz of the year. There's 5G or there's AR or there's kind of those individual things. I think AI is so revolutionary and so groundbreaking that it will be the relevant topic for maybe a decade or more.
Oh, wow.
It will change that much about what we do. I mean, there's all kinds of technologies that we're excited to use, but the technology just isn't quite there yet, and ways to implement AI into production pipelines that will create even greater levels of efficiency.
What are you two doing? I mean, individual questions. What are you two doing specifically in AI right now?
So at Sony, we're looking at multiple areas of AI, one of them being the metadata generation, like Ed said.
Right.
Other areas around localization. And so this is again, the lowest hanging fruit, the things where the process can be augmented. So using AI to help with local language translation, generation of subtitles, we see as potential opportunities, as well as image enhancement. So if we have a production, say, that's trying to use some older footage for historical purposes, but now that we live in a 4K age, how do you make that footage look like it fits into the context of the story? So AI could help upscale some of that old archival footage.
That's a big help. Andrew?
We're using AI in a bunch of different ways currently and kind of on the edge of ways that are coming. So some of the current uses are on the script and production side is using natural language processing to understand what a script looks like, to create a cube map, and then you can start valuing that and saying, what if we plug in this actor? What if we plug in this location? Is it worth spending more than $35 million? Do we need to spend less than $6 million? And you can start gauge profitability as long as you have an accurate data set. So that's one segment. On the production side, we use sort of AI in small ways. In some cases, it's as a chatbot. We've done some marketing projects where we've had an AI chatbot where as you're speaking to an avatar, basically, that text is fed into the cloud, and the cloud is judging, the AI machine learning algorithm in the cloud is judging, is that a positive, is it a negative, is it unclassified, and then the chatbot will respond. So that's a kind of like user engagement version. And then there's also things like style transfer, where we can understand what the color profile is of an image and say, okay, this is where red is mapping, this is where cyan is mapping, this is like what brightness looks like. And then you can start mapping that to a new image where you can just style transfer what you've seen in certain images to others.
That'll save a lot of time, a lot of money. I'm just wondering about how best is it to embrace these technologies? There's some talk that in certain aspects, the AI, the machine learning, takes more time than for someone to just do it themselves. In certain situations, such as maybe restoration. But in other situations, they're invaluable. What's the best way to embrace this technology?
I think basically seeing where it fits immediately. So, I mean, people think AI and they think, oh, well, the ultimate end game of machines taking over and controlling everything and AI generating content on its own, from script to story to actually generating the image. But I mean, I think that's still a ways away. I think right now it's using AI, like I said, in terms of augmentation and really seeing, where it makes sense economically. And part of our group's mantra is to study these areas to see what's ready, what's not. I know we had spoken earlier about colorization.
Yes.
And how AI could be used to colorize old black and white footage, and how that may be a good thing for documentary types footage, but for more stylistic footage, going back and colorizing that, a filmmaker might might not like that, basically, because it might take away from their artistic vision. So it's kind of straddling that fine line between what makes sense and what you need to dial back to preserve the art.
And I'm wondering, are there any AI technologies that you think we should steer away from right now?
My feeling about anything related to AI is there's this sense, I think, when you hear those two letters, that we're talking about sentient beings and Terminator stuff, and the reality is it's a coprocessor. Like AI is a coprocessor, and that is meant to allow us to do things faster, to do things better, to do things cheaper, and to kind of delegate away some of the small stuff. And all these examples that we're describing require the human touch. It requires some kind of human oversight, because it's all corruptible. I mean, even humans are corruptible. So having an AI that is sort of programmed to do its own task makes me think about Fantasia. And I think it requires a human to be overseeing it.
Yeah, even what I mentioned earlier about localization, I feel like, optimistically, AI would be great if it could get you 80% there in terms of translating something, because there are a lot of little nuances, especially going from one language to another, where things get lost, and you need that human intervention to see how a joke translates from English into another language.
Oh yeah.
Just because contextually a lot could be lost there in a literal translation. So I think what AI does, it helps take care of the mundane and allows humans to now focus on more of the kind of the creative aspect and one of the things that matter most.
I was just going to add that I think one of the co-processing efficiencies of AI is also, as we're getting to a place where filmmaking is coalescing with gaming, and we're starting to see greater kind of overlap between those two industries, you start to have the kind of variability and interactivity in filmmaking that AI can provide. For example, when you're creating backgrounds, and suddenly now you can take an individual, you can map that person and create multiple iterations that suddenly look like thousands of people when you've only really scanned 2 or 3. And using AI, this is something that's already happening now with a neural net and kind of understanding what human behaviors are. You can have it look like it isn't a bunch of mirror images, but it's actually individuals doing individual things.
Wow, because usually it was the whole mapping and
That's
the
right.
compositing, and you take the one and you composite the other, and that takes a tremendous amount of time.
That's right.
To do, and then you look like everybody looks like they're the same person. So
Yeah, swapping
there's
T-shirts.
Yeah, and to take that example one step further, or kind of a little differently, I was involved in production they had filmed a shot, and originally they had intended that shot to take place middle of the day, so sun high up in the sky. They filmed it on a soundstage, and they lit accordingly. And throughout the film finishing process, the director decided, no, I really want this shot to be at sunset. And so, so much that colors can do to really match that lighting, where we didn't use it at the time, but an AI could come in and actually enhance that image to make it look more realistic, to make it look like the lighting matches to the background plates, which are sunset, as opposed to high noon.
That's so. It really explains the industry, especially in shooting, when there's always going to be changes for whatever reason, whether it be artistic or whether it be logistic. And that's something where I guess AI can really come in and prove its worth. So do you have any other examples of that? Any other projects or
Something I'm particularly excited about is what AI is able to do understanding depth. And it's sort of a computational version of AI where you're able to extrapolate depth from multiple cameras or from even a single camera and understand stabilization. Those kind of efficiencies that take so much time on the front end, whether it's about the equipment or the personnel required to achieve that specific shot or to change something like Daniel was describing, is huge. And I think one of the biggest problems on a set is when we're shooting green screen, which is almost every job now has some aspect of composite, whether it's commercials or movies. The idea of having to light that green screen, having to spend a whole unit just lighting and shooting assets on that green screen, the idea of having depth information that's understood computationally and accurately allow us to shoot in the field. So that's the thing I'm kind of hoping for personally.
Oh, I would think so, and that enhances the creativity and the whole aspect of production where it's really hurry up and wait.
That's
People
right.
think it's very glamorous, but when you're there's so much time in setup, so I would think that AI could really play a role there.
That's right.
And beneficial. So what's on the horizon for machine learning and AI in post-production?
I think right now it's really kind of getting our heads around how to harvest as much valuable training data as we can. We as a studio have a pretty extensive archive of footage, whether it be feature or television, and so going back and trying to figure out how that data can be used to train an AI in the different things we need to do. Because you think about it, all that data represents things like translations, like I mentioned earlier, image and scene analysis. We know a lot of times what's in the scenes already, so we can use that as training data for an AI, as well as some of the footage that's just not part of the final product, but this whole array of unused footage like I said, that could be used again for stock footage or even other uses that we don't even quite know about yet in the new digital age.
Yeah, yeah.
I think one of the, besides getting more AI tools, not only used more broadly, but also bringing those into the production pipeline from post and even into prep, I think one of the things that's most valuable, maybe even more valuable than anything else, is on the distribution end, looking at how you can start to hyper segment audiences. So whether it's with language translation or it's with correlating, understanding what user behaviors are, what audience behaviors are, and what they want to find, and helping with the immense diversity of product that's out there, helping people find what they're looking for. Because I think that's a real hang up, and for people to feel contextually spoken to. So it's sort of like diversity of content meeting diversity of demand.
Interesting. You know, I forgot to ask in the very beginning, and so I apologize. If you guys can also just talk to me about what your responsibilities are, what you do in the industry. I apologize to go backwards here, but Daniel, why don't we start with you?
So I'm part of the technology development team at Sony, and I focus primarily on technology strategy for the studio. So going around and looking, getting our crystal ball out, looking into the future a little bit and seeing what technologies coming down the pike could be relevant to the studio and help foster technology adoption on some of the technologies we identify that could be really useful. We feel things like digital cameras, new ways of doing VFX, new finishing tools. So we try to get out in advance, learn as much as we can about these technologies, and help socialize those, and also help those get adopted within the studio.
Great.
And I have a background as a cinematographer and sort of advanced imaging with visual effects and motion capture. And several years ago, ended up for a purpose-built thing, built this VR camera that was super high resolution, which sort of turned into consulting for different camera manufacturers to develop that kind of 360 imaging and then volumetric imaging. So now I consult for different brands like Pepsi and Walmart and NBA and Madison Square Gardens on what content innovation looks like and how to bring some advanced tools into the pipeline.
And you're integrating AI and machine learning with these clients?
Yeah.
Any specific examples you can talk about?
One of the best examples of AI, I think, just recently, only thinking in a production pipeline, is a project called Talk to the Hand, and this was
great.
for. Did you see this? This is from 13 Reasons Why for Netflix, and it was a chatbot, which was already a kind of a hot button topic because of the topic of suicide that was part of the storyline.
Yes.
And it was so popular. Basically, what it was a way of engaging with an audience, and so people would go to the site, and it would appear that you were getting pinged from Google Hangouts, from FaceTime, and from all these different apps that are on your phone, but really it was a shell. So it was, and you were being contacted from somebody from the show. So you're seeing somebody speak to you, and whether you say yes or no or maybe, that character's responding to you, that chatbot is responding to you, and it was extremely real. It was extremely alarming, and it was actually something that was so popular they had to take it down at a certain point because it was sort of drawing attention to the show that they didn't want.
Wow.
But it was kind of a great example of how you can engage with an audience in a really contextual way, even if it's drawing the wrong kind of attention. There wasn't anything negative about what this was, but it was just something that like Netflix wasn't super excited about, like drawing so much. Look how it's taken from real life. The idea is, indeed it was.
Absolutely. Do you have anything, Daniel, to add to that?
Not that comes to mind right now.
That's okay. What advice do you have for professionals in the field for AI and machine learning? What do you think is important for us to know, whether we're involved in it or not? Because another aspect of this is people are afraid. People are afraid that they're going to lose jobs. Editors are afraid that assistant editors are going to lose jobs, and editors are going to lose jobs. And I just would like to wonder if there's a way we can break that myth a little bit, because I can't believe that's true. And I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think, we as a studio are still going to do $200 million or so tent poles, right? We're not going to get away from that. I think, where AI fits in is making things a little more efficient, and kind of looking at the landscape with a lot of the digital media upstarts in the industry, Netflix, Amazon, now Apple. There's going to be a need for more content, and we, Sony, as a studio, actually, create content for all these platforms. So I feel that with this need for more and more content, especially as we go to a global media ecosystem, there are going to be job shortages actually, and I think AI is going to help offset that shortage by making things a little more efficient. So I don't think people need to be too scared about it. I think they need to be mindful about maybe their position as they know it might change. Just like when we went from film to digital, there were a lot of positions that changed in terms of what they did. I think it's going to be the same for AI, but I don't think AI is going to replace entire people anytime soon.
I mean, our world is becoming more automated, period. That's happening. And so I think the pernicious thing is to put your head in the sand and say, I don't want to lose my job, I don't need to know about this. The reality is that the more that professionals, creatives, people starting out, people who have been in the industry forever, even more so, the more involved and the more aware we can all be, the more we can put our imprint on what this future is. Because we're about to see this revolution like we were talking about. I think what we can anticipate over the next 10 years will be revolutionary. Content in 10 years will be so different than it is now relative to 10 years ago that I think that the more we can get ahead of it, the more we can have some impact, some influence over it.
Yeah, there's a funny story to add to that. In Japan, there was a hotel that marketed itself as a robotic hotel. So they had robots that checked you in at the front desk, robots that clean up the rooms and so forth. And they recently came out saying that they had to lay off some of the robots because they weren't as good as humans at those given positions. Yes. So I think that kind of says a little bit to how AI is not really ready to replace full-time humans.
Well, I also think about with you, Andrew, where you're a cinematographer, you've been in the production realm, you've sort of embraced this technology. I mean, initially starting in the virtual reality world, but now you've gone this much further with AI. It's sort of created a new career for you in a sense, or an adjunct thereof.
Yeah, I think this might be controversial to say. I think that cinematographers and visual effects supervisors and people like Daniel in the same kind of context we all have to be generalists. We all have to understand production, we have to understand post, and more those worlds are converging. And I think the more we can wear multiple hats, the more successful we'll be. And in the field of imaging, it's already going that direction. The idea of volumetric imaging, where we're capturing assets in a cylinder, sort of outside in, where we're taking people to other transportative environments, the kind of virtual production tools that are available that really don't necessarily have anything to do with AI, are part of the modern landscape of how we can make projects more efficient, more inventive, and use technology to tell great stories and keep things interesting. And I think we have a responsibility, I feel, as someone with an imaging background, to keep that level of quality high. Because there is a version of, in the race to make as much content out there and to monetize as much content as you can, to erode what quality means. And so for me, what imaging means, and my background in that medium, has been about how to maintain a high bar for quality. And I think that's what's most important, 100 years from now, is that we've still maintained that thread of quality, legacy storytelling.
Interesting. Also curious, what are you two here to look at NAB? What's interesting to you? What have you come here for?
For me, it's just a variety of technologies. There's a lot of change happening in the industry and a lot of advancement in technologies, especially around storage, which is critical, I think, to the notion of AI. This whole notion of ultimately getting to a online archive. Well, right now, a lot of our archives either stored on tape or even kind of on film, so to speak, some of the older stuff. But once we progress to get to the point where everything's on some sort of spinning disk or solid state drives, then that allows us to run AI continuously on those as the algorithms improve to find new things. So kind of those two areas of what I'm primarily focusing on this trip.
Interesting. And Andrew?
I mean, everything. I think like I'm saying, we're all have to sort of be generalists these days. So it's rendering, it's cloud storage, it's camera technology, it's lens technology. I think there's no replacement for putting your eyes on something. And so much of this business, there's so much hype. It's so easy to kind of tease an idea or have a great looking picture and not really have something that's fully baked. So it's good to kind of see it, put your hands on it, and understand exactly what it is, and figure out how it can, what's valid and what isn't.
So NAB is still viable to come here and have that tactile experience, not just with one company, but with hundreds.
One fell swoop.
Yes.
One fell swoop. Is there anything else you think that would be interesting for us to cover that we haven't discussed?
I think this isn't the end of the conversation about AI.
Oh, I think this is just the beginning.
It's just the beginning.
I mean, we're sort of at the Model T of AI.
That's right.
I mean, one other strange question I have is I have some people thinking, oh, the autonomous vehicles, they're not going to be ready for the general public for at least another 10 or 20 years. Do you have any predictions on that?
I think that's a long estimate. One of the early movies that I worked on was AI, Steven Spielberg's AI.
Okay, yes.
It was 2001. I mean, just for context, 18 years later, finally we're having this conversation. This is a long game.
Yeah.
And it's something that's so valuable and so transformative that I think it's not just a hype cycle. It's not something we just will, talk about something next. It's not going to lose to 6G or 7G or whatever kind of the next technology is. This is something that's a long conversation.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think this wraps it up for us, and we are going to be prepared for our next guest, and we will speak to you soon. And this is Linda Rosner from NAB Live. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.